It's St. Luke who fills out for us what happened later in that day on that first Easter Sunday. Luke says that two of the disciples set out for a town called Emmaus, which was maybe some 7 miles west of Jerusalem. And there on the outskirts of Emmaus, they meet a man who Luke tells us is the risen Jesus, but those two disciples don't recognize as such. And so they begin a conversation with him. Did you hear about what happened over the weekend? And that conversation turns into dinner. And throughout the course of that whole evening together, the two disciples begin to feel like all of Scripture is opening up to them, that the whole story of salvation is opening up. And at the end of it, one says to the other, "Were not our hearts burning when he spoke to us?" They realized who it had been all along, Jesus their Lord. Now Jerusalem is still there today, some 2,000 years later. So is Bethlehem, so is Nazareth, Tiberias, but Emmaus is not. It made it some 600 years after the story. There's a wonderful church that the Byzantine Empire built in the 300s, but now it's all in ruins. It turns out there was a virus that spread throughout that region. It started in Emmaus. The virus killed more than 25,000 people in Emmaus and the surrounding areas in the 7th century. It was too much for Emmaus to handle, and it was never rebuilt. What we have now are the old stones and the tour buses filled with pilgrims who come to remember this story, a story of when the disciples had their hearts burn at being in the presence of the risen Christ. I think about that story a whole lot now. All of the things that we're beginning to learn to let go, and the things that we're beginning to hope we can soon embrace. I think about all the stuff that Emmaus was occupied with, all of the busyness and frustration, all of the laws and relationships, all of the hopes and dreams and the hurt and the woundedness. All of those things, they're gone. We're left with a story instead of hope. One story of hope. Behind me is our church. Now these stones were laid in 1950, so this church has only been here for 70 years. I don't know if it's going to make it 2,000 years. I don't know if it'll make it some 300 years, as those early Byzantine churches, the Byzantine church in Emmaus lasted. I know this church will serve its course and do good by its call to love God and love the community, love our neighbors. And maybe that's the point. Because as this virus changes who we are as a society, and I do hope it changes who we are as a society, that we can embrace that burning we now feel, to be somebody new, to not look back and think about how we get back to where we were, but instead to look forward and think about who we can now be. What will be those occupations and worries that we get to leave behind? And what will be those new hopes and dreams that we embrace? I believe if we lean into those, that will make us a more faithful community. And it'll make us a stronger society, one that cares a little more for each other than we did before this. And maybe that will be our legacy, even after these stones are gone. Our legacy, maybe that'll be it. A story of how once all of these people were changed, and changed for the better, changed together, their hearts burning with the hope that can be.